Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing another buffed Pokemon from the Season 21 balance update for Pokemon Go, and that is the buff to Avalugg. Now, Avalugg Hisui version previously saw a ton of play in the Master League prior to the Rock Slide nerf. However, we're now actually today looking at the original Avalugg. Its moveset, Ice Fang, Icy Wind, and I'm choosing to run Earthquake as my nuke move of choice. It is a pure Ice type, so not the greatest in terms of defensive resistances, so I'm pairing it up with a strong meta core of Palkia and Rhyperior. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we're starting off leading Palkia into Zygarde. Opponent is going to save switch into Zacian, and Zacian will swiftly be answered with Rhyperior. I am still running Surf on my Rhyperior. I just don't really have the TMs to change it back to Breaking Swipe, as Rhyperior does have quite a few moves, so for now, and for the rest of these battles, we are going to be on Surf. But you can very easily run Breaking Swipe. I full send the Rock Wrecker, that's going to connect and pick up the knockout. Back in comes Zygarde. I want the back-to-back Rock Wreckers. I get there, but I'm too low. The Dragon Tail that goes through is actually going to pick up the KO. I bring in Avalugg, but it's a disaster in the back. It's Primarina, and I am actually very, very weak to Charm Primarina. This is a problem. The Ice Fangers really do not like Primarina. I farm up, I switch, and my only hope is that somehow I caught a Hydro Cannon, and I did. I caught a double resisted Hydro Cannon, and with that catch, suddenly I'm back in this game. Primarina is not bulky. It relies on its typing to be successful. I'm going to try and make it to a Spatial Rend. Opponent is going to switch into Zygarde at the last possible second. Zygarde gets rocked with the Spatial Rend, and it's a simultaneous KO. Back in comes Primarina, but Avalugg, it has a health advantage, and it has energy as well. Icy Wind is going to be no-shielded. We get a 2-shield flex, despite a massive Core Breaker appearing in the endgame. Hopping into the next match, leading into Zamazenta. Now, Zamazenta would be a very big problem for my Rhyperior to deal with, so I'm very happy that I am catching it on the lead. They're going to fire off a Crunch bait, fish in for a debuff, and I'm going to return fire with my Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to be no-shielded by the Zamazenta. Zamazenta does not get its next move, as I'm able to get a farm down. So Zamazenta out of the way. Hopefully Rhyperior can do well in the back. In comes Dawn Wings, and here I'm just always going to bait. Even if they call an Aqua Tail, that's still very valuable damage. What would be bad for me here is a shielded Spatial Rend. I'm going to go for another Aqua Tail bait, and I'm able to grab a shield from the opponent. I would make it to a third Aqua Tail, so my opponent is going to be forced to actually fire off energy. And now I can send in Avalugg. I'm looking for an Ice Fang down so I can debuff whatever's in the back. They do make a Moongeist Beam, and I will respect it. Avalugg is very, very bulky, but Moongeist Beam is an incredible move. In the back is Rhyperior, and this game is over. Icy Wind is shielded, and now it's time for Surf. So Surf, actually going to be very, very helpful in this particular match. They're going to go for a Breaking Swipe there. Whether they get the debuff or not, it's not going to matter. This is double super effective damage. Surf, one-hit KOs the opposing Rhyperior. In comes the Dawn Wings. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Picking up a pretty solid lead in the next match, leading into Yveltal. Opponent save switches into Zacian, and again, I have a very nice answer with the Rhyperior. Most save switch Zacian are Play Rough, Wild Charge, but this one is actually on Close Combat. I was not prepared to see a Close Combat Zacian on the save switch. Here, I am going to go for a Surf and an Undercharge, because I do want to exit this matchup with some extra energy. That will allow me to get an extra Mud Slap, so now I'm pretty close to a Rock Wrecker. I'm going to Rock Wrecker Yveltal, and after they shield, I'm going to pivot out of this matchup. So I Rock Wrecker, they actually no shield, I send in the Avalugg, in the back is Xerneas, and this should just be a win. As now, I can apply debuff after debuff to the Xerneas, and even before any debuffs went through, they would still not be able to one-hit KO with the Close Combat. Avalugg does have some pretty solid bulk overall. Close Combat is going to connect, and that's just not a problem for Avalugg whatsoever. I do decide to shield. They're heavily debuffed, so at the very least, my Ice Fangs will add up a ton, and I get the final shield back with the Icy Wind. And now I have a pretty straightforward winning play, and that is to switch Palkia. If they throw their energy, they just lose, because they're heavily debuffed. A Moonblast does nothing. I very comfortably tank that. I farm down a Yveltal. In comes the Xerneas. They would get KO'd with an Aqua Tail, so the opponent is going to immediately resign the match. We move to the next match, Palkia versus Palkia. Okay, we have a very neutral lead, but it's actually a good lead for me because my opponent is not best buddied. I am going to make it to the Spatial Rend here, winning the cap tie, but no, they switch out and make a catch onto Necrozma Duskmane. Duskmane is going to be answered with Rhyperior. I don't really want to give up a shield here because I know my opponent has energy on their Palkia. So I will just fire off the Surf to deliver a knockout. And now I have a choice to make. Do I want to double shield Rhyperior or just let it go? I say I'm just going to let it go. I think Rhyperior's done its job. I'm going to bring in Avalugg. A little bit of lag there as I send in the Avalugg. Opponent is going to be firing off energy, and I will commit the shield. It is going to be the Spatial Rend. What do they have in the back? It's going to be Zacian, and up energy, I should be in a pretty solid position. I fire off the Icy Wind. That's going to be shielded by my opponent, and now, even if they close combat, it's something that I can survive. So I am going to no shield here. Opponent is going to go for a Play Rough, and that's not really a problem. I'm farming up a ton with the Avalugg, going for the Icy Wind, but I do lose the CMP tie, so I will commit the shield. Opponent goes for the Wild Charge, and now they are debuffed. So this Icy Wind, they're going to have to shield. And since they're debuffed, I'm going to switch. It's actually a simultaneous switch out, but I should still be in a winning position because my opponent is very close to Aqua Tail range. So I can fire off the Aqua Tail and then get the Dragon Breath down and take the win. That's going to get them very low. But Disaster Strikes. They survive on 1 HP. And what I thought was a guaranteed win con of me switching out ends up turning into a loss. I guess I should have just stayed in with the Avalugg. That is very unfortunate. We need some redemption after the throw in the last match, and we're not off to a good start leading into Zacian. I save switch into Rhyperior. Rhyperior is answered with Landorus, not off to a great start, but this is where Surf is really, really good. Surf does do slightly less damage overall than Rock Wrecker, but why it's helpful is I can actually two-shot here, and my opponent does not have the energy for a second Sandsear. So, as the Rhyperior, I will actually get to force a shield from my opponent. So, they're forced to give up a shield. I can now bring in the Palkia, and I'm bringing in the Palkia here instead of the Ice Fang user because I know Palkia's health is not going to be very valuable considering they have a Zacian. I'm just farming up a ton of energy, and once they throw this, I'm going to look to snipe with my Avalugg. They go for the Stone Edge. It's actually a simultaneous switch out. Avalugg into Zacian. Zacian firing off energy, and I will respect it with a shield, but it is just going to be a Play Rough. The Zacian being switch locked does make things uncomfortable. However, I can lower their damage output pretty instantaneously with an Icy Wind. The Icy Wind is going to connect, and now my Avalugg will suddenly feel way tankier than it did before. I no shield. It's going to be a Wild Charge from the opponent, and I just think that I want energy. Whatever's in back, I'm hoping it's something like a Zygarde, because if it is, I can absolutely bury them in ice damage. Zacian is going to get KO'd. What is the final Pokemon here? It's a Dialga. They try and catch. They're unsuccessful, but a Dialga is still not a winning endgame for me. I have a lot of energy on the Palkia, but I don't have a Spatial Rend, and I don't have the health to get there. I only see one win con, and that's going straight for the Earthquake and hoping my opponent does not know that Avalugg has the Earthquake. It connects. Down goes Dialga, and I guess they get 3 shields for next game because they didn't use it here. Bad lead in the next match, leading Palkia into Florges. I save switch Rhyperior. Opponent responds with Palkia. As Rhyperior, if you're able to land a Rock Wrecker, you can actually flip switch. Most of the time people will go for Breaking Swipe, but of course I don't have Breaking Swipe on this Rhyperior. So instead, I'm able to land the Rock Wrecker, flip switch, which is massive because now my Palkia is free from having to deal with that pesky Florges. Back in comes the Florges, going to be instantly met with the Rock Wrecker. Rock Wrecker is going to connect. Florges getting absolutely rocked. Florges is going to fire off its energy. They need a Moonblast to KO. And I'm going to bring in the Avalugg. I bring in the Avalugg, but I get the 1-turn bring in, and that means that I actually don't get the Ice Fang through to knock them out. They survive on 1 HP due to the 1-turn bring in. In the back is Rhyperior though, and this game is over as I just get to debuff my opponent significantly. They actually let the Icy Wind go, and they end up resigning the match. Moving to the next match, Palkia versus Landorus. This is a terrific lead. Opponent save switches into Mewtwo, and I'm going to stay in. This matchup is a little tricky as Palkia. As Palkia, you have to go for a Spatial Rend to win the zeros. However, if you Spatial Rend and the opponent shields, then suddenly you lose the ones. So I decide to play for them shielding, but they do not. So I will have to go down a shield, but that's fine because I have a secondary counter to the Landorus. I have my Avalugg lurking in the back. So my opponent, they do get farmed down. They're going to bring in Landorus, and either they're sacrificing it or they're going to go for a double shield farm down here, expecting Landorus is good in the back, because a lot of the time people run Palkia and they run a bunch of stuff weak to Landorus. But I have a second Landorus counter, so they double shield, they save all this energy, and I screenshot here because what should I bring in? Should I bring in the Rhyperior or should I bring in the Ice Fang user? In comes Avalugg. They're going to Sandsear Storm bait. Even at -1, these Ice Fangs are shredding this poor Pokemon. I will go for a double shield. I'm now 2 stages debuffed. In comes Rhyperior, and this game is just over. I can bank a move, and I have Surf, of course, available on my Rhyperior. They do get the debuff, but that's not going to be enough to save them, as Surf, even at -1, will still pick up the KO from this health range. So Surf KOs my opponent, they bring in the Landorus, they know they're getting outpaced, and they will resign the match. Bad lead in the next match, Palkia versus Zacian. Did run into a lot of tough leads for Palkia. I save switch Rhyperior. I'm answered with Kyogre, and this is just heartbreaking stuff. I know this doesn't KO, so I'm going to go for an undercharge. There's no point in full charging it, because that's just going to limit the amount of farm my Palkia can get. The only good news, if there is any good news, after your Rhyperior gets obliterated by a Kyogre, is I'm going to get some farm on Palkia, and Kyogre out of the way means that my Avalugg will not have to face it. So I do get a nice farm down with the Palkia. Back in comes the Zacian, throwing 1 Dragon Breath and the Aqua Tail for optimal timing, and then I really need Avalugg to clutch here. In comes Avalugg, opponent not switching out just yet. Instead, they're going to stay in and fire off some energy. I will commit the shield. I want to keep myself healthy. They go for a wild charge. In the back is going to be Rhyperior, and maybe there's a chance. They are up a shield. And now, even though we're at even shields, they're up energy, but maybe there's a chance I can pull off this game. Opponent, they have a ton of energy. Are they going to bait? I say no. I shield and I get it right, as it's going to be the Rock Wrecker. My opponent, they now have the Rock Wrecker loaded. If they overfarm, I could make another Icy Wind. So I'm going to switch into the Palkia and get a catch. That is a massive catch. Rock Wrecker does not KO, and that gives Zacian a little bit of farm. And giving Zacian farm is not ideal. Back in comes the Zacian. I'm going to be firing off the Icy Wind. Icy Wind, oh, plus the farm does not KO. They make the Wild Charge, but that doesn't KO. Can I farm down Rhyperior? It's pretty low. Rhyperior ends up farming down me, and unfortunately, we can't quite pull off the win. Another Zacian lead, my goodness. Apparently today was not the day to lead Palkia. And now I send in Rhyperior. The fact that they're staying in, I'm just going to go for this Rock Wrecker. Rock Wrecker does a ton of damage here. Rock Wrecker is going to connect. Zacian very low. Opponent actually saves the energy and sends in Dawn Wings, which was pretty surprising to me. Dawn Wings now going to be hit with the Rock Wrecker. That does a ton of damage. Dawn Wings will never bait here. They can only get to 1 move. So I'm more than happy just to preserve some HP on the Rhyperior. If my opponent has close combat on the Zacian, they can get 2 moves. But if they're on Play Rough, they can't get to 2. And I'm expecting, since they didn't close combat and dip, that they're on Play Rough Wild Chart. So I'm just going to shield a farm down. And now I have a 2-0 shield advantage. In the back is Dialga. And at this point, I should be okay. Even though I'm down 2 shields to a Dialga, here my opponent actually tries to no shield, calling a bait, but I still had a full health Palkia and I had an Avalugg, and Avalugg cannot get KO'd by any one move. Look at this. They're going to fire off the last second Roar of Time. Doesn't KO. Avalugg tanks it like a champion, and that's a good game. The dream lead in the final match, leading into Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is going to bank a bunch of energy, and now they're going to bring in Dawn Wings. Dawn Wings, I decide to fire off a Spatial Rend, and I immediately regret it. I so very rarely actually full send in neutral situations with Palkia, and the one time I do, my opponent actually does end up committing the shield. I'm going to look to overfarm massively because I can Dragon Breath this down into Aqua Tail range pretty comfortably. So Aqua Tail is going to pick up a knockout. They're going to send in Xerneas, and I'm going to pivot into Rhyperior. Now, it's very important that I overfarm by 1 here because I want to play to the CMP tie when they close combat. Because Xerneas can normally take a Rock Wrecker. When they're in -2 defense, they cannot. They're forced to give up this final shield, which puts me in a really terrific position. They're going to close combat again, and since they're in -4 defense, they can honestly just get KO'd by an Aqua Tail here. So after thinking about it, I can just bring in the Palkia. They send in Ho-Oh. I'm going to go for the Spatial Rend. Spatial Rend is neutral, but it does more than an Aqua Tail. So I go for the Spatial Rend. That inflicts some serious damage. And now I can just win the game with Avalugg, because they're forced to Brave Bird. That lowers their defense by 3 stages. And now I can Ice Fang down with the Avalugg. And there's nothing that this poor Xerneas can do. Xerneas, let's apply a permanent attack debuff here. It's the final Pokemon. They have no way of resetting this debuff. They're farming up a ton with the Xerneas, doing everything that they can. They're at the back-to-back close combats. I don't have to shield the first, though. Avalugg tanks it. They're going for close combat number 2. The easiest shield of my Go Battle League career right here, as the Ice Fang knocks out the Xerneas, and we're able to take the win. All in all, I feel like Avalugg, it's a pretty solid Pokemon, and I'm excited to see, once Master Premier does eventually return, what it can do in the Premier format. Its coverage is limited, and I think that's the biggest thing holding it back. But having the ability to debuff stuff with Icy Wind and being very bulky are all very big pluses. So again, I think it's going to be along the anti-meta / spice side of things, where there's probably going to be people who can use it and have some nice success, but it's not going to be a must-have Pokemon or anything like that, just due to the fact that the coverage is a little bit limited. I would potentially love in the future if it did get access to a cheaper ground type move. I don't know in the main series if it gets something like Scorching Sands or Drill Run, but having cheaper ground damage, specifically to fight back against the steals, I think would kind of be almost a secret sauce, so to speak, to help Avalugg ascend into that meta tier. Because Ice Fang, Icy Wind, you're already off to an amazing start. Of course, you're going to struggle against the waters like a lot of the Ice Fangers do. Like stuff like Primarina, not going to be fun. Kyogre, not going to be fun. Palkia at the very least is neutral, but over time, Palkia is an absolute menace in those neutral matchups. But a cheaper ground move, I think, would go a long way now that its fast move is finally up to par. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.